It's our pleasure now, my pleasure, to sit down for our very last conversation of the 2021 SDG Action Zone. It's perhaps only natural, having just heard from some brilliant young people who are closing the rhetoric and reality gaps in their countries, that our minds would turn to global leaders. What do these veteran stewards of people and planet see when they look to the future? What are they doing to keep the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals? And how do we feel and amplify that impact in our own communities? Who better to reflect on that and all we've learned over this extraordinary SDG Action Zone than one of the UN's most influential leaders, not to mention the principal architect of the Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina J. Mohammed. Welcome back to the SDG Action Zone, DSG.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you, and very exciting what we have experienced in this last week.
I second that. And I'm so excited for us to have this closing conversation together to reflect on everything we've learned and what there is to look forward to. So we've talked a lot about the frustration, especially from young people, about the trajectory of our shared future. What do you think it'll actually take to move to a more equitable and just future?
Well, I think one of the first things is the lessons. I hope that we can learn from them and we can take them into what I would say would be an intergenerational transition. We have to see, young people taking that baton and moving on with the agendas that we have. There's nothing wrong with the framing of the SDGs. It's exactly the North Star that we need. But it's how we get words off paper onto the ground and into people's lives, and really working with poverty, working with climate, all the issues that matter most to young people who have to think about not just their future now, but future generations too.
Absolutely. You're seeing probably as many examples of progress as anyone on Earth. So it would be wonderful to hear your thoughts on where you're seeing real, tangible progress that is actually impacting people's lives right now.
Well,
what are your favorite examples?
My favorite examples really have been in the digital space. I mean, COVID came along and knocked us off our blocks. And it was a universal knocking off a block, right? We still stayed connected as a human family because of technology. So it is a world that has everything that it really needs to get the job done. It's just about how we do that. So what I did see was education, people taken out of the classroom, but then online. People taken out of business, but then online. People who were disconnected from communities suddenly, where they were, seeing each other every day in the workplace, in the markets, you name it, in the hospitals. And suddenly we were online. And I think that gave me an awful lot of confidence that there is, a future that is new, it's bright, it's still connected. So that for me is the experiences that I think were really, truly amazing, that we were able to stay working and connected as hard as it was in a time when everyone just sort of locked down and it was a health crisis, it was a socioeconomic crisis, people uncertain about tomorrow. But you could have a conversation, you could connect, you could see your families. I was here in New York alone. My family was in Nigeria. And it's Teams and Zoom that kept us connected.
And it actually worked. I mean, we'd had so many conversations in the past about how this sort of thing never would work. And it's so inspiring that it's gotten us to this place. And it actually speaks to something I've heard you say before, which is that we need new narratives and new approaches in order to move forward. And so maybe it'd be cool to hear you, maybe in a little bit of a lightning round version, talk about some new narratives and new approaches you think we need with respect to the topics we've been talking about. So let's say, starting with partnerships, what are the new narratives and new approaches that come to mind for you that we need to implement as we think about partnerships?
Well, partnerships that are demand-driven, in other words, that we're not seeing partnerships imposed because we think that these are the good things to have, but the demand coming from countries, from local communities, on what type of partnerships they'd like and who they want to see at the table. And that because I think today is a new era where this new narrative, co-creating. So, partnership means what? That you're at the table together doing what? And I think that as we think about the frameworks that we have, the SDGs, every single one of those goals is exciting, but how to implement them, we have to take the people that have the knowledge, that have the wherewithal, to those who understand, know where the shoe is pinching, and at the table, co-create the solutions that are needed for it. Could be young people, could be indigenous people, could be, as you said, the veterans, whoever it is. It has to be a table of stakeholders who are energized and have something to bring to the table, each and every one of them, to get a product out that will connect and give us the world that we're looking for by 2030 in the SDGs.
And I love this idea of where the shoe is pinching, because for me it's so evocative that we can't all wear the same shoe, right? You actually have to look for the person who is wearing the shoes so that you can find the solutions from them. What about new narratives and approaches on poverty?
Well, I think
what do we need there?
Well, the poverty story is that leave no one behind. And just as I said, know where the shoe is pinching, it really depends in which region or country or even within a country that you are. So, you know, there is no one size fits all. There are the aspirations, but a reality that for us is very important, that we travel the journey to end poverty, travel the journey to end gender-based violence, travel the journey to make sure the digital divide is closed with each and every one in their context. And I think that's something that's exciting. It becomes very much more real in people's lives, and we start to explain all, as some people would expressly say, UNEs, the long sentence that never ends, that has all the right words and says all the right things.
Or acronyms.
Yes, or acronyms. But if the rubber's to hit the road, then it needs us to be very clear about the importance of making it real in each context.
Narratives and approaches in the gender space and gender equality?
Well, gender equality is something we've been trying to achieve since before even Beijing. And we've had enormous success with bringing the world together on generation equality. I think that, you know, the diversity that we see amongst women's movements, feminists, is a richness that we have in the world yet to capture. And I think here again, we have to travel this journey. There are many people who don't have the wherewithal for it. And here, young people need to frame that and determine that. But it's not just young women. This is half the world when we talk about women and girls. And you can't fly on one wing, right? But we have to have that intergenerational conversation with men and women. If we're not doing this together, there is not the partnership. We will be making the same mistakes all over again, and then we're going to have a conversation on how to bring the men back into it. So we need to make sure that we are up front and center, we're at the table, we're occupying that space, and that we're having a conversation, and we're finding these roles and responsibilities and a division of labor between men and women, girls and boys, that can take us into a space where, you know, the 2030 agenda becomes real. Each one of those SDGs, whether we talk about cities or we're talking about climate action, or it's about institutions and governance, that men and women are doing this together.
And the umbrella needs to be bigger, to, as you said, not just to include men, but to include all kinds of feminists, and a definition of feminist that is encompassing. You've probably seen that I'm going down the SDG Action Zone agenda. So lastly, narratives and approaches on climate. What do we need to do to sort of rethink the way that we're approaching climate?
We've got everything that we need to know that we are in a red alert time, as the Secretary General has said. And that red alert needs to be what you wake up to every day with what actions you're going to take it to green. And that's what we need to do now. And COVID has been such an amazing time, because we've been talking about transitions, we've been talking about adaptation and what we do with 100 billion and how we're going to COP. But we need to relate that to the spaces and the countries and the people that this is going to concern. And I spoke to a lot of young people today. They were talking about financing. They were speaking about the life that they need and would want, and not the life we see for them. And so in climate, as we look to those actions that we need to take, let's think about what the energy transition means to go green, and how we can do that off-grid that reaches people, communities, populations. Let's see what we talk about, the digital divide and connectivity. The food systems. Food systems are amazing. Everyone likes food, right? But many don't have it. And yet there's so much that is being produced in the world today, and we need to find a way to bring that rich ecosystem together with all the things that you talked about: inequality, women, young people, technology. And so that's what it is. It's a fusion of the SDGs, making that real in people's lives.
It's amazing that I've managed to stay in my chair and not fall out this week, because there have been so many moments where I wanted to jump out of it. But when you said we know everything we need to know, it resonates so much, because the words climate debate no longer should exist in anyone's vocabulary, right? Because there is no debate. But it brings up an interesting point for me, because it seems to me that when we talk about the SDGs, it's almost like climate is this issue alongside them. People seem to not always connect the fact that obviously climate is its own goal, but it really infuses the entire agenda as well. And how do you experience that, and how do we start to change the mindset on that? Is that something you see, and how do you talk to people about it to help them understand the way we are seeing climate and its role in the SDGs?
I often find the questions that we ask and the debates and discussions that we have on climate at 40,000 feet is where it's siloed. On the ground, in its real life, no one talks about climate outside of what is happening in agriculture or outside of what is happening with a conflict that has been exacerbated by it or a crisis. They are speaking and feeling and experiencing those things at the same time. So I think that the country teams we have as the United Nations, which are huge, rich capacity and expertise, with our stakeholders, because we can convene strange bedfellows, get them all at the table and begin to talk about climate in its reality. So an investment in transitions, if we say it's an energy transition, we need to know what types of energy we will be using, and what does that power? What services does that give? How do we then look at industry? So every time you take a goal, see how that thread is pulled to each and every one of the other goals. So you're doing a plug and play with the SDGs. You're never leaving any one out, but they have a different effect depending on the one that you're doing. I see the SDGs, when I look at goals 7 to 15, those are where I want to see the investments, because I can see the returns in dealing with poverty, in education, all the services, water and sanitation. And at the center of all of this, of course, is of course women. Women that need to occupy those spaces to make sure that we have the outcomes we want in terms of the quality, in terms of its inclusion of that leave no one behind, and the ambition. And so this is for me still the framing of the SDGs is one that we are all in. I don't think that we have quite understood. We sort of see 17 goals and think it's very complicated, and could have been 6, could have been 8, and my goal is this one. But look at the framing of each of those goals and the expectations, and you will understand that even if you take the gender goal and you hang on to it for dear life, if you're not letting up a bit and pulling the threads of the other 16, the gender goal itself won't survive.
Absolutely, because there's such interconnectedness there, and there's a beauty to that ecosystem that really resonates if you take the time, as you say, to sort of let it wash over you. But everything you've talked about, which is incredibly powerful for me, and I know for everybody out there, it feels like the UN is so powerfully positioned to act on all of those things. So it would be great to hear you talk, and I see you smiling because it's true. We all know it's true, and it's amazing. It's amazing to have you in this seat. So I wonder if you could talk about what the UN is doing on all of those initiatives. We know the SG unveiled the Common Agenda report to talk about sort of the UN 2.0 and the UN of the future, especially on the heels of celebrating 75 years last year. And so what is the UN actually doing to keep the promise of these SDGs and enact all the things you've just talked about so eloquently?
Well, very much voice is important, and amplifying not just our voice, but other voices that come into this global town hall, which is what happens. That's what we are, the global town hall for our global village. But on the ground in over 130 offices is a UN footprint, and it has varying expertise in the different agencies that we have, and fantastic leaders, our resident coordinators, pull together people around the table, stakeholders that need to act on specific goals. So if we talk about, for instance, SDRs, and everybody knows special drawing rights, that the IMF has had a historic record of getting to 650 billion. If they're shared and they land in a budget in a country, then the UN can bring together all those that need to help inform how those SDRs would be spent. And in the recovery from COVID, it's going to be about that response. The response of an SDR, leveraging whatever domestic resources there are there to get to the scale of the issues. Everyone must have access to portable drinking water. We should have quality education for every child, especially the girls. So all those things, cash transfer programs, social protection programs, all of those are part of what the UN convenes at the country level to bring people together, to plan, to look at the policies that are needed, but also to bring the resources and the capacities and skills. In particular, I would say that the emphasis for us now is how we are rebirthing to be more fit for purpose and responsive to young people, and have them engaged in leadership, in the implementation, And at the end of the day, you know, carrying the baton, this is what we hand over year after year, generation after generation in the UN. We are 75 years old, and we intend to be better for it. Having learned the lessons and understanding it really is about we the people.
I could cheer for every single thing you're saying the entire time you're talking, but that would make the audio very difficult. It strikes me, though, that we've talked a lot about how discouraging some of this last year has been, that folks thought we would be farther along, and the fact that we are far along on so many things and yet not able to figure out some of the things that would have seemed basic, like vaccine distribution equitably, is a struggle for folks. So in your unique position, it would be awesome to hear about a failure from this last year that hit you particularly hard, and what the lessons are from that, how you sort of get yourself to a hopeful place having experienced that.
Oh, I think the first failure was that for a tiny little virus that floored all of us and put us into lockdown, that we didn't get the solidarity needed for that global response, that the vaccine became, you know, just a common good, a people's vaccine. That for me was the darkest day, realizing it wasn't going to happen. And because it wasn't going to happen, it wasn't just the number of lives that we were going to lose, the number of frontline workers who were sacrificing their lives in a pandemic that we were losing. In developing countries, that means a human resource base that is very difficult to replace, because we hardly have enough doctors and nurses and teachers, and we're finding them all on the front line. So that for me was the implications of that were depressing. To the point that you sort of say, where do I find in the depth of all this misery, the hope to go on? Now, I think that, you know, the first thing it did was bring a realization that it was tougher to get solidarity than we thought, but that we could still go on, we could still talk about it, bring the UN's voice to it, and we continue to do that. Now, where am I even more anxious am I that the virus of the lack of solidarity for COVID does not come and infect the climate conversation. That's another space where I'm seeing, as we open today, it's not so good. We are not living up to what we say is another global crisis where everyone is being affected. So yeah, this is not a good year in leaders around the world stepping up to the plate and delivering for all people. It's over 7 billion, and it doesn't take too much. So what you really are seeing is inequalities exacerbated at every level, but also there are leaders missing in action.
It's a rare moment where what's happening outside our virtual studio sort of interferes in such an amazing way, but you were just talking and we heard sirens going past, and it feels like the entire universe is coalescing around this exact issue that you're talking about, and it's powerful to hear you reflecting on it. Is there any specific thing that leaps to mind when I say what makes you hopeful across everything that we've experienced over this last year and all of the amazing work that you're doing? What makes you hopeful?
Wow. Well, I had the honor of being able to visit 3 countries over a period of 4 days last weekend: Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia. And I walked into Tanzania, met by an amazing woman who is at the helm of affairs, President Suluhu. Her vision, her not giving up on her people, her priorities for maternal health to really keep the hope alive in her country. That for me was like, okay, we can do this, we can get behind her, we can support her. I go across to Kenya and you see young people who are engaged in the Food Systems Summit, led by another amazing woman, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. And we are going to deliver food in a more sustainable way that's going to transform people's lives. There's a massive ecosystem. So yes, I'm ready for that as well. And then I go into Somalia, which is very tragic because every day people are losing their lives on the way to trying to realize peace. They will have an election. Why was I visiting? It was really to keep them going from 24% to 30% of women in parliament and standing in solidarity with women. And just being in a room full of women, young and older, who were also hopeful and so engaged and doing amazing work and knew the issues better than anyone did. So I didn't need to tell them what to do. They were there just for us in the international community to say, hey, we're here, and put the spotlight on us because it means you haven't forgotten us. We know that Afghanistan is a real challenge, but here in Somalia, we also need 30%. We need to be part of this government. We need to be part of a peaceful Somalia. So those are the things that I came back with lots of homework, and that's my hope. waking up every day to see that that homework's done.
With assignments. I love it. And on that note, I just have to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, DSG, for your inspirational leadership, for your always rolling up your sleeves and being willing to do the real work, and for making time for us here in the SDG Action Zone. We'll be here tracking your progress, rooting you on, and doing the work right alongside you. So we'll see you next year.
Yes, that would be
and for
great.
everyone out there, stay tuned for the official end of the SDG Action Zone. Well, it's official. We're in the final lap of the 2021 SDG Action Zone. But you're going to want to stick around until we cross that finish line, because not only do we have a stellar musical performance coming up in just a few minutes, we're also very excited to debut the Action Zone after show this year. Some of the superstars who made this entire experience happen behind the scenes will join us front and center to delve into how they did it. It's going to be a fascinating chat. Though today, day 3 of the SDG Action Zone, was our day to focus on climate, it feels as though we've been talking about it from the moment we began. When Jay Naidu told us on day 1 to stand up, as he did as a teenager in South Africa years ago, it's Mother Earth he asked us to advocate for now. Tremenda's founder, Julieta Martinez, spoke so passionately yesterday on day 2 about the profound need for girls' education, and pointed to the fight against climate change as one way educating girls could change the world. And it makes sense. The Sustainable Development Goals are so deeply interconnected, and climate is one global goal that infuses them all. Fail to fix it and the entire agenda fails. But succeed, or even start to succeed, and suddenly every element of the agenda feels full of opportunity. That, for me, was the great message of today. There was a clear call for investing in a green recovery, that is, investing in a circular economy, energy transitions, food systems, nature-based solutions, and just transitions. Activist Jamie Margolin and UN Climate Chief Patricia Espinosa talked about centering vulnerable voices for COP26, a critical summit in the struggle to stem climate change. Because of course, inclusion leads to accountability. In the Great Energy Transition panel, the head of the world's largest trade union federation, Sharon Burrow, suggested taking the conversation everywhere you have influence, including the boss's office. Ask your employers what their plans are to climate-proof the workplace for their sake and ours. And Dr. Akin Adesina, president of the African Development Bank, laid out concrete, ambitious infrastructure plans on moving from rhetoric to reality, or as he put it, turning the megawatts of words into the megawatts of electricity, of renewable energy. Young climate activists Elizabeth Watuti and Paloma Costa reflected on everything from ecological grief to legal remedies as powerful tools in the movement to win hearts and minds, and legislatures. And Dr. Agnes Kalibata dropped some knowledge that better be lighting Twitter up as we speak. We need to drop our logos and egos to make change. There's a richness to this movement that makes it feel so doable, despite the odds, a humanity that is downright inspiring. I get teased lovingly about the little tics that come out during these events, the little quiet claps, or you can snap for that, or how I hold my heart and totally scratch up my audio. But the one I've noticed recently, and especially today, is just fists in the air, which is not really me, but maybe it is now, because it speaks to the energy I think we've all felt throughout this 2021 SDG Action Zone. There's a strength in these conversations, a fierceness, a sense of belief. It is the urgency of now, amplified and underscored by the possibility of this moment. We are without a doubt in a code red for humanity, as the DSG said, but perhaps that's the harsh truth we needed to hear, unequivocally, definitively, to finally get us to the place award-winning designer Cyril Gooch reminded us today we ought to start. We have to take fear off the table, he said. It's not about being scared. We invented the problems, so we can actually solve them. That might as well be the tagline for this entire 2021 SDG Action Zone, for the whole inspired endeavor that is the decade of action. And none of it would be possible without the support of a far-flung and extremely committed network of partners and allies. So I want to turn the stage over to the global head of the SDG Strategy Hub now to say just a few words about these invaluable contributions. Welcome, DAWDA JOBARTEH.
What an amazing 3 days. None of this could have been possible without everybody that contributed, the partners, the audience, the participants, the creators, the contributors. Want to give a special thank you to the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General for setting out the vision as high as you did and entrusting us to deliver on that with regard to the SDG Action Zone. To Anne-Marie and the UN Office for Partnerships, to the SDG Strategy Hub members, the networks and partners that engaged us around the shared intelligence and content curation and speaker selection, to the speakers themselves and performers. Wow, fantastic. Thank you for all that you've done, all that you will do, and for sharing those stories with us. Thank you to our donors for the years of support that have enabled us to be able to grow and do what it is that we're doing, to the government of Norway, to the United Nations Foundation, to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To our design and website team, fantastic, elegant, colorful, easy to use. Thank you. To Christian and NADIRA, our director and moderator MC. You guys were a joy to work with and help deliver on this grand vision, which we share. So thank you. To my small and mighty and powerful and determined SDG Strategy Hub team, to Nathalie and Catherine, Juliet, Peony, Ellie, Nora, Rookshar, and Christina, well done. We did it. Christina left to go to graduate school and was so determined to see this through on the 11th hour, decided to come back to make sure that it was really, really well executed. To the virtual show, Plowman and the team, thank you for bringing to life our vision. You outdid yourselves even compared to last year, which we thought was absolutely brilliant. And thank you for the patience in dealing with us as well. What a team, wow. Last, but certainly not least, thank you for everyone that tuned in to watch our event and share your stories and share your questions and your insight and your passion, with whom, had you not joined us, there would have been no one on the other end of the screen. And again, we can't forget that this is not the work. The work is what we wake up and do every day and deliver for people and for planet. As we've been talking about the last 3 days, the Sustainable Development Goals or global goals are the world's to-do list, and we have to get it done. So let's recommit, let's double down, let's do whatever necessary to make sure that we see it through. Stay safe. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next year.
And thank you, DAWDA, for leading us here. It's been a collective effort, to say the least, but having you at the helm is what made this more than a pipe dream. These past 3 days, we've heard from almost 80 speakers. They came from every continent and almost every sector to discuss the most pressing issues of our time, including vaccines for all, combating racism, curbing digital divides, social protections, circular economies, education, the power of parity, changing biases, equal rights, energy transitions, food systems, nature-based solutions, recovery, climate finance, and a whole lot more. From the rousing words of global leaders, including the UN Secretary General and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, to young changemakers like SDG advocate Valentina Munoz-Rabanal and human and women's rights activist Trisha Shetty, speaking truth to power, there's been no shortage of power or courage. But the real work starts now, and it truly is everywhere. Just yesterday, as we were trying to envision a path to true gender equality and a more inclusive world, a story came across our news feeds that stopped us short. In a seemingly forward-leading country with a relatively new constitution, a film about a gay couple in love and fighting against discrimination was banned for apparently violating legislation that outlaws homosexuality. That's a move in not the right direction. And this isn't the only place it's happening. It just shows how much work we have to do, how vigilant we have to be, and how easy it is for the progress we've made to evaporate before our very eyes. It is a privilege to sit in this chair for me. And every time I'm lucky enough to do it, I don't know if it'll be the last time. Maybe I even hope it is, because the point of being here is for us all to move together to a place where we don't need to have these conversations anymore. But it occurred to me last night as I was thinking about saying goodbye to all of you today, that in truth, I sit in this chair every day. You sit in this chair every day. I've been sitting in this chair since I was a little kiddo when we were new immigrants to the United States from Guyana, and my mom used to chat with us every night about what was happening in the world, from Iraq to Ireland to all the different neighborhoods of our new hometown. That's where I learned to care and where I first understood the magic that happens when we just do this thing we do as humans, having real, honest conversations and letting ourselves be moved by them, believing we can move others with them. And I know you all have your own version of that story, of that moment when you became the thinker you are, the activist you are, however that manifests. So if I have calls to action for you, they're simply this: act. Please, like Cyril said, find your unique way into the movement to realize the SDGs and act on them. Act on it, but keep talking too. Don't let this conversation end here, which of course means you should post everywhere using hashtag SDG Action Zone 2021 and hashtag For People for Planet, and that on-demand tab at sdgactionzone.org to find your favorite content, obviously. But I want you to own your chair in the real world as well. Privilege those real life talks, IRL, whenever and wherever you can, with people you might not normally engage, on the things that matter the most, even if they're hard. This SDG Action Zone isn't meant to be a flash in the pan UNGA event, but it's up to all of us to make sure it has the dramatic impact we know it can have. And to that end, we have one awesome campaign we want to lift up. The World's To-Do List, a campaign that was launched this week by our friends at Project Everyone. It uses sticky notes to demonstrate how and why the global goals truly are the world's to-do list. And it's such a clear reminder that we have the plan to fix the world's problems. We just need to get the action to do it. So take part in that at www.worldstodolist.org. It's time to use our voices, our votes, our wallets, our collective love for people and for planet to guide all our decisions, because we're all part of the solution. We have to be. So before we go to the final fantastic performance and our awesome after show, let me just say again, thank you to every single person who tuned in from home, who shared and engaged with these critical conversations on social media, who's committed to keeping the promise of the SDGs well beyond these 3 days. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll leave it there for now and hand it over to our closing performance. Please welcome 4-time Grammy Award winner and UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador from West Africa, Angelique Kidjo.
Don't ever let them hurt you in any way. Oh, never let them steal and take the best of you. Keep building cities from the ground. We rising with the wave. Mother Nature has a way of warning us. A time bomb set on a lost countdown. Do you hear it? Will you stop it? Won't you listen? Amen, si amen, eva mi ale benekike amen. Amen, si amen, que le gbandia erola nu silo. Each one of us needs one of us. We need each other. We need each other now. We need each other now. Each one of us needs one of us. We need each other. Don't ever let them hurt you in any way. Oh, never let them steal and take the best of you. Keep building cities from the ground. We rising with the wave. Mother Nature has a way of warning us. A time bomb set on a lost countdown. Will you find it? Will you hear it? Will you listen? Amen, si amen, eva mi ale benekike amen. Amen, si amen, que le gbandia erola nu silo. Each one of us needs one of us. We need each other. We need each other now. We need each other now. Each one of us needs one of us. We need each other. Whoa. Yeah.
Yay! Welcome to the Action Zone After Show. In this last year and a half of all virtual events, the upside has been pretty obvious. Just think of how inclusive we were able to be, how much reach we had. But the one thing I know I've really missed is the time at the end, after the official program wraps, when we all sort of mill around the stage and just enjoy it, connecting, reflecting, and committing to memory all the moments of insight and inspiration we know we'll hold on to forever. So that's exactly what we're going to do here with a few of the truly incredible people who brought the 2021 SDG Action Zone to life. Please welcome back Global Head of the SDG Strategy Hub, DAWDA JOBARTEH, and from the Strategy Hub, that small and mighty team you heard about earlier, CHRISTINA, MICHALSKI, and NATHALIE DELORME. Welcome, welcome. How are you guys?
Good.
Feeling excited. So I just got to go around the horn to start. What are you most proud of now that the SDG Action Zone of 2021 is officially wrapped?
Wow. So first of all, I think it is, the SDG Action Zone team that's pulled it all together, and Christian and NADIRA, you're part of this. TVS, you're part of it. We've managed to accomplish so much. I think the caliber of the speakers has been absolutely phenomenal. The substance of what they're talking about, backed by their actions. The speaker analytics and the diversity that we brought to screen, the alignment with regard to our narrative to what's actually really happening beyond these walls. It's just all really, really great. We managed to deliver on the ambition that's set out by the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General. And, there were so many connections that were made off screen because of people's involvements and just the willingness of people and speakers to collaborate with us and come together and help lift this. It's been absolutely amazing.
CHRISTINA, what about you? What are you most proud of?
Everything, honestly. I remember where we were when we first started thinking about the SDG Action Zone a few months ago, and this moment right here. And I'm blown away with how well everything has gone. But very specifically, what I appreciated most about these past 3 days were how non-UN it felt. And I mean that in the best way possible, that while the substance of the conversations was still extremely high caliber, it felt like we finally left the UN jargon, the rhetoric, all of these talking points that don't really mean much at the door, and we actually had an honest and authentic conversation. And it made that connection much easier in my mind, that what we're talking about, especially with climate, it's not this abstract thing that's going on far out on the opposite side of the world. That's happening right here. And I think it was Teresa at her spoken word piece at the opening of the day, when she was saying, I don't know how to talk about climate change, but I know what it looks and feels like in my community. There were a lot of moments like that just really touched my soul, and I hope that it did the same for all of the other viewers out there.
And I think it did. NATHALIE, what about you? Proudest of?
I think I'm most proud of and actually very grateful for these unscripted, authentic, and candid conversation each speaker agreed to have here, especially our newer format, these in conversation, with these unexpected and actually intergenerational pairings, which didn't have a lead moderator. And both speakers are really sharing their perspectives and approaching each session with curiosity of others' work and reflecting on how it can be applied to their own. And I think this is really part of the ethos of the SDG Action Zone. It's breaking down silos. Every issue, every challenge, every opportunity that was discussed here during the last 3 days can only be achieved by society as a whole.
It's beautiful. It's like being at a salon or a coffee shop where you just think, I get to sit in on this amazing conversation, and it just made everything feel so connected and so powerful. So 100% agree with you there. DAWDA, this was obviously an undertaking, to say the least. What did you have to overcome to get here? How did you pull it off?
Well, it wasn't I pulled it off. It was we pulled it off. I think there was a whole lot of determination, of radical teamwork, of radical collaboration. So many people touched this project, and each and every one's contribution helped bring it alive and to make it possible. And again, just a huge kudos to those on the other end of the receiving end of this feed, because without you, without your participation, without your questions, without your social media engagement, this wouldn't have all been possible. And one of the things that we paid particular attention to, and we heard it come out throughout the course of the days, is this concept around, defend the defenders, and making sure that activists aren't put at risk because of their words and their conviction and their involvement and engagement in this. And that was a particular concern, especially this year, given what's happening around the world and given the spike in violence towards media, towards activists, towards indigenous folks standing up for their rights and standing up for people and planet. And it's something that we, in what it is that we did, it was also very, very central in our minds and in our hearts to making sure that we were doing no harm and we were protecting people's conviction and involvement in the work that we were able to bring together and the platform that we were able to create.
And you're being a little modest at it, because I know for the folks out there, it looks like there's probably 1,000 people behind the scenes of this production. But I don't think I've ever worked with a leaner, meaner, more awesome group of folks to make pull something off that is this beautiful and this honest and this authentic. So I've got to just add that little addendum to DAWDA's answer there. I want to go to you, Nathalie, because representation was a real focus of this program. So talk about why that was so important, what the goals were, and what it took to ensure that we were able to meet them.
Sure. I think we heard many times during this year's SDG Action Zone that inclusion is key to accountability. And I'm actually repeating it now once again. And that only together we can really have the power for real change. Most importantly, we're not just saying it, right? It was at the heart of every step of this project. So to keep inclusivity at the center of our program, we set ourselves a specific representation criteria, in addition to all the other considerations, which we actually completely exceeded with 65% of our speakers who are non-male, 45% that are below the age of 35, 70% that are from the global south. And we had a multitude of sectors ranging from academia, civil society, private sector, media, government, local authorities, the UN, the creative community, activists, and I could just go on. And honestly, there's just no other way. If you want to lead to the lasting transformational change we just kept on talking about, it can only be achieved through the richness of diversity. And I actually think we should have this kind of criteria for everything that we do. And this is one of the reasons why we're here at the end, to democratize and open the space at the UN.
There is no other way. Where can we find those stats? Because I think we need to all be sending those around as a call to action for folks. Will you be sharing them beyond this?
Absolutely, yes. As already mentioned, we have our beautiful website where all the on-demand will be available, as well as our social media channels. All the information will be on our website.
I just have to underscore that because it needs to be shareable. Christina, did you want to jump in?
I just want to add that while the numbers are great, like I think it's the voices and the perspectives like behind the numbers are what are even more important. So like, yeah, we can post that, I guess. But what I would really encourage everyone to do though is to go through the speaker roster, because I think we were able to give a little bit of the background of each of the speakers, but they are doing some really, really incredible work. And then by going to the speaker roster, you'll be able to see the organizations that they're a part of, and then maybe even join in with that. So just wanted to flag that.
These are true change makers, because they're like, it's not about analytics here, which is really nuts. But it's like, we've got to motivate organizers as much as we motivate the folks who are actually participating in these. And I think as somebody who's been to a lot of these sorts of events, I would be really patting myself on the back if I were you guys, because it is hard. It is hard to get to those numbers that you're talking about, because some of this is so insular that you really have to be deliberate about being inclusive. And kudos to you guys for doing that and more. Actually, Christina, I want to come back to you on that subject of programming as well, because putting together something like the Action Zone is this like balance between really defining and executing an overarching narrative, but then keeping it differentiated and surprising enough to keep us all engaged and learning new things. This is sort of your area in particular. So how'd you tackle that mission, and did we achieve your vision?
You want to know what? I think we did achieve my vision and more. And also, this wasn't just my vision. This was months of going on this profound listening tour of hearing what other partners from businesses, from other entities in the UN system, hearing from the Deputy Secretary General about the challenges and priorities of the world. And then we took this, made this complete picture about what it is the world needs right now. And we tried to take the viewers on a journey about the urgency of the moment. I think gone are the days of these big, bold commitments that are forgotten, fade away a second later. So we wanted to showcase the lack of political will, leadership, and imagination from the top, that it's an action is exasperating these situations. We've heard from this week that you should either step in, step up, and if you're not doing either of those things, then step aside. What I really appreciated from these conversations as well was we wanted to profile not just the top government and business leaders, but actually, as Nathalie said, the people that you might not have heard of just yet from all over the world. And when we were going through this listening tour and hearing from partners, they were telling us some incredible people that I personally never heard of, but now I'm following them on Twitter, and like I'm just going to continue like learning and growing from them. And again, in terms of the narrative, we wanted to showcase how we're moving away from rhetoric and these like big commitments and moving to reality, because in all honesty, time is ticking, and this is the decisive decade of action. And what happens right now, the investments that we make and take today are going to have profound impacts on the choices that my generation and future generations have in years to come. So very excited. And again,
yeah, and you have hope. I mean, I think that was such a big takeaway for so many people this week. People saying, I feel hopeful. I feel hopeful and inspired by this community that you guys have brought together. So it's just bottom line, so true. I could not let us leave today without asking you all for your personal highlight. So what's the 2021 SDG Action Zone moment that'll stay with you forever, a quote you won't forget, or an insight that unlocked something for you? And maybe I'll kick us off by sharing mine, because it's really a compliment to all of you guys. There was a moment in the day one Ask Away where Jay Naidu said, I wish I were 14 again so I could be in the movement. Like, this moment is that exciting. And in my mind, it just flashed a picture of all of you guys and being like, yeah, Jay, I think you're cool enough to join this crew. We'll take it. So that's really the bar that you've set. And it's such a funny thing because we had so many deeply moving moments, but it was amazing to realize that like the community that you've built is that powerful and moves people that much. And everybody wants to be in it with you, which is the point of this entire exercise. So DAWDA, what's your highlight for us?
I mean, NADIRA, you just commented on something that I think is so true about all aspects of this. You know, none of this is being done alone. We all stand on the shoulders of giants to get anything that we're trying to do done, right? I have so many different highlights. I mean, it's you know, Eddie started us off on day one in terms of, you know, saying and quoting that leadership is too important to leave to the leaders. Ernest today talking about WTF. Commented that trickle dynamics, it's the biggest pawn in the world. We know it will never work. Never trickle down to where it did most. You know, Sarah, in terms of, you know, now is the time for radical change. Everybody needs to change their behavior. President Adesina of the African Development Bank, you know, and you cited him in your closing remarks. We need to turn megawatts of words into megawatts of electricity, of renewable electricity. You know, Dr. Agnes needs to drop our logos and our egos, and it being really, really about system change and getting the work done. And if we do not have people and planet at the heart of everything that we're doing, thinking about, creating, structuring, investing in, we're not going to deliver the world that we want and the world that we need and the world that is sort of outlined and exposed in the 2030 agenda, which is radically transformational. And you know, that is the work. We you know, meetings aren't the work. The work happens behind the scenes, and that's what needs to accelerate and really, really you know, it's the DSG constantly says, move the needle, because that's what, you know, we have to impact people's lives. So I just, you know, immensely proud, especially of the radical collaboration of the team, of the opportunity to sort of bring this alive, right? And to what Nathalie said earlier, you know, bring the UN to the world and the world to the UN in a way that is unscripted and authentic and radical and just awesome. So thank you for everyone that touched this. Really, just thank you.
I love all those highlights. Christine, I want to come back to you because you touched on a few things that already were deeply moving or inspiring for you. What's one that stands out that you want to share with us now? And I have to say, DAWDA alluded to this before, but you are actually in graduate school now, and this mattered so much to you that you jumped back in the fray to be in the mix with us, for which we are all deeply grateful. So I hope you had a few highlights to take away with you as you get back to class.
No, of course. And one thing I'll preface is I've been working with the SDG Action Zone since the very beginning in 2019. And very honestly, and I can say this very honestly because I'm no longer working with the UN, that this was my favorite year of the SDG Action Zone by far. And one of my favorite highlights was something that DAWDA, you just mentioned, took one of my favorites, was when Ernest Gibson, the Youth Advisory Board member, Secretary General's Climate Group, said WTF, and at first I got really nervous, but then he said, where's the finance? And I just think when we're talking about rhetoric to reality, we need to talk about how we're actually investing in all of these big transformational changes that we're talking about. In the US, there's a really big 3.5 trillion reconciliation bill that's going on right now, and a lot of companies that are talking about their commitments to the environment and social governance. In DC, they're doing completely different. They're doing something completely different. So what I want to say to businesses, to governments, to just everyone out there is WTF, where's the finance?
WTF is amazing. It's amazing for all the reasons you said, and we all had our hearts skip a beat, and then we were ready and roaring for Ernest. And Nathalie, I want to give you the last word on this because quiet as it's kept, this after show, Action Zone after show was so much inspired by you because it felt really important to sort of have this moment to talk about this, not just job well done, but just the work, like really doing the work, like DAWDA said. So what were your highlights or your main highlight coming out of this incredible 3 days?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And then I think I'd like to reiterate Ilwad Elman's call to action. It was about informing ourselves, joining movements that are existing. She also spoke about the decades of experience that is already at the grassroots level. And she just called to get involved from wherever we are. And I think that's an important reminder of the power we hold as individuals. And today's unjust and unsustainable systems, they are made of and by people, by individuals. So it takes people to tear them down.
Mic drop. On that note, anything you guys didn't get to say that you want to say just very quickly before we sign off officially?
I'll say something that this moment we're in right now, it is very hard. And so something that I've taken away from this program is it's okay to feel anxious about how big the problems are, but it's been really assuring to see the work that other young people are doing, and the courage that others have and that I inspire to also carry out to take on these big thorny issues of the world. So thank you to everyone who's watched and to all the speakers. Thanks.
It gives you heart. Final words or call to action, Nat?
I'm actually thinking I want to leave the last word to Christina just because of everything that she has just said. But it's bringing the UN to the world and the world to the UN, really showing another side, just looking at this very young team that is there trying to do things differently, accompanied by speakers who are speaking up, not just at our event, but every day in everything that they do. So it's not about the event, but it's about the strong, powerful, and fearless words that are spoken here, and moreover, the action that is happening every day, because we have a few years, it's still years, to go to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I just cannot imagine a world where we all should never imagine a world where that has not been achieved.
I love it. And just that moment you had there just embodies the spirit of collaboration and partnership of all of this, because we are all in it together, and we need to be lifting each other's work up. And so DAWDA, to you for a last word or a final call to action.
I think, you know, the mayor of Freetown said, given that you're talking about, you know, the work that they're doing in Freetown means it's working. I think, you know, the answer to that is yes, yes, yes. But there's so many stories that also aren't heard that are working and that are existential, and that, you know, people sometimes don't have the luxury of success. It's about survival, and it's about the ability to thrive and provide and really just, you know, match up everyone's full potential and opportunity. And, you know, there's an immense promise in the Sustainable Development Goals and global goals, and it really is about, you know, and Greta said it last year, that, you know, future generations will not forgive or forget our failure if we fail to act. And the reality is failure is not an option here, because it leaves too many people behind. So we have to use every choice, every moment, again, to create the change that we want to see in the world, and make sure that it's sustainable, it's fair, it's just, it's equitable, and that we're not leaving anyone behind, and we're allowing people to fulfill their rights that the world has come together to agree upon and commit to. And that's all I'll say. I mean, I think we just have to get it done. And we can do it.
Thank you to all of you for creating this amazing space and for letting us do the Action Zone after show, because this has been exactly the joyful debriefing space that I hoped for, and I think we all hoped for. And to everybody out there, stay safe and keep fighting the good fight. We love you. And with that, it's a wrap from the 2021 SDG Action Zone.
Woo!
You can snap for that.